Hello, everybody, and happy Thursday. This is the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock cost optimization at AWS. My name is Alex Head, and I run the optics team here at AWS.
Perfect. Thanks, folks. Bryce Dickens. I'm a senior financial architect, and I get the coolest job supporting our public sector. And so if you're a three-letter Fed agency or ed tech or some other person in support of our state, local, or even Fed government, I get to support you.
And our special guest today, Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Race. I am the head of FinOps and Cloud Governance at Citizens Bank, and I am happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Well, how is everybody's week shaping up? Bryce, is it still like 180 degrees in Texas right now?
It is, but I got the absolute reprieve of going to Seattle for 2 days and had to wear a jacket, which is unheard of.
I thought that Seattle was having a pretty big heat wave too.
Well, a heat wave for Texas, relatively speaking, is different ballgame.
It's going to be 98 degrees in Connecticut today, so it's pretty hot here also.
Oof. Yeah, I haven't even looked. In Georgia at this time of year, you just ignore. You just assume you are not going outside.
Right.
Well, we're so happy to have you today, Amy. Why don't we go ahead and dive in? I know we have a lot to talk about. Can you give everyone your 1-minute origin story?
Sure. So I like the 1 minute timer there. I really never get to 1 minute, but so I've been here at Citizens Bank for 11 years. I've always been within infrastructure in multiple different towers and infrastructure networks and colleague technology. And as our cloud business was growing, we always, focus on the migrations. How are we going to get to the cloud? How are we going to build this landing zone? All this great stuff that you have to do to get there. And then we started to get these bills from Amazon and they started to grow. And nobody really had the time or the inclination to focus on that and make sure that we were spending what we said we were going to spend and making sure we weren't spending too much, taking advantage of all of the savings that we could get from Amazon. And so I had sort of done something reasonably like this before with budgeting and managing spend for different departments within infrastructure. So they thought that I would be the perfect person for this. So they said, here, this is your new job. And I said, fantastic. What the heck does that mean? So really had to, from the ground up, I had absolutely no idea. I didn't know anything about the cloud. I've always been on-prem or colleague related devices and things. And now I'm learning about the cloud and how do we pay for things and what is an EC2 instance? And I had no idea. We inherited a tool from an acquisition. And one of the salespeople from there said, hey, you should join this group called the FinOps Foundation. They know everything. Okay. So join the FinOps Foundation. I think at the time there were probably 50 people as part of the FinOps Foundation, and now there's thousands. So I read the book and I took the training and I started learning. And still, it was very abstract to me. It was very difficult to put all of that learning into how does that make sense to me here and how do I use that? And it was just me, nobody else. I was at the time a team of one. And so I just started reading everything I could. And to be honest, the biggest resource to me at the time was my TAM from Amazon. And I know that sounds, like promoting, but he was fantastic. He taught me more than anybody ever did. I mean, he sat with me. We went over Cost Explorer. We built all these different kinds of reports so I could understand what I was looking at. We went over services, all this great stuff. And I had a lot of support within my own cloud team as well. And then I started looking at some old reInvent information. So at the beginning, then you were just starting to kind of have FinOps sessions at reInvent. But there was one that really struck me, and it was called the FinOps Roadmap. And it really broke down FinOps into, I think there were like 7 towers in there. And I was able to take that information and rework it for my own exact situation. So we went from, in all of the different towers, from beginner to advanced to intermediate and to advanced, where we were in those towers and what did I need to do to get me to the next level. And that's really the one thing that made this whole FinOps thing tangible for me. It was my favorite piece of information that I learned.
So from that experience, what was the timeline on this? Was this like you did this in 30 days? What did that look like for you?
Cute. No, it was a lot longer than that. So I struggled. I would say for the first year by myself, I struggled a lot. I am a reporting person. I have reporting experience, but still, I couldn't figure out what to do with the data. So once I got another resource, we hired we have a college graduate program. So my boss found a resource. I don't know if he's listening to this, which would be amazing if he was, who had a little technology and a little financial put together, and he became my resource. And he really helped me build out these reports and make them visually appealing to people. And that was my first real, how do you get adoption from this, right? And the first thing that you need to do is show the data, because without the data, there is nothing, right? So he was the person that helped me really be able to show the data. Then we used our third-party tool, and we started building some dashboards and getting a little bit of interest. But it's been about, I think I'm on 3 years now doing this. So it was quite a journey, and the crawl was a little bit longer than I would have liked. I think I'm heading towards the run now, but the crawl and the walk, there were some tears. I have to be honest.
One of the reasons we love having customers like you and people with your background come on is because I think it's really important and really helpful to just hear the unique stories, the unique paths, right? Everyone has a different way of learning, a way of looking at it. Bryce, I should know this because it should have come up in your interview, I'm sure. But how did you first, like, what resources did you go to when you were first trying to figure out, like, what is FinOps and optimization?
The number one tool that any developer uses, I used Google a lot. And that tended to point me in the right direction, because one of the things that Amy's experienced, and a lot of people tend to experience, is they just don't know where that first step comes from or what that first step should look like. And I would say there's no wrong answer. Leverage. Now we have the FinOps Foundation. Now we have a lot of documentation for AWS. So it's a lot easier now, I would say, for folks starting out. But Google, it's really irreplaceable. You'd be surprised what kind of random questions you can ask. It just pops up right what you need.
YouTube is pretty good too. I spent a lot of time on YouTube, how to price things when I was trying to figure out more about the calculator tool from AWS. I was using YouTube and learning quite a bit. When I took the AWS practitioner test, that's where I did all my studying, on YouTube. But at one point, I needed to understand how to price out Lambda. And there are some really great videos on there that support all of the stuff that we're doing in FinOps.
I wanted to add in, I have put on the bottom of the screen just the link to FinOps Foundation if you're interested in it. And then I'm also going to throw in the YouTube channel that our team puts a lot of our resources on. So all the Twitch episodes, anytime we've talked at reInvent, maybe skip my reInvent one. No, kidding. So these things can be helpful. I agree. Listening to people and understanding that it's really helpful from that standpoint. So I'm going to move to our next topic, because this is something that is near and dear to me, because I remember dealing with this when I was at the Weather Channel and being just so confused. So coming from traditional vendor management and how you budget in a large organization and how you forecast, when it comes to cloud, you have to do that very differently. And so can you tell us a little bit about how you approached that, kind of lessons learned, and where you're at with it now.
Yeah, so that's a great lead into that. So we struggled with that. We had always struggled, to be honest, with run rate from a support perspective, licensing. When we had business cases, back in the day, we were doing these grandiose business cases, for millions and millions of dollars, and thinking we were going to roll this big thing out in 18 months or 2 years. We were going to get this much capital, this much OPEX, and then we were off to the races, so to speak. But we forgot to include all of the support costs that would come afterwards and the run rate. And I was always the person that managed all of that. So I was always the loudest person saying, wait a minute, there's going to be costs and I have to account for them. How do I, where are those costs? So we sort of had the same problem now, only on a huge level, where everyone was saying, well, I'm going to save this much money in my own department and move all of these things to the cloud. Now I get to remove all my server costs, my support costs, my licensing costs. And everyone said, this is fantastic. And they forgot that I was going to have to pay for all of that. So in the first year, they said, what's your budget going to be? We said, well, we're going to migrate this many apps. Let's go with this number. And it was literally, that was how we did it. The second year, we put a little bit more thought into it, but it was still centralized, self-contained within my organization, within cloud, where we came up with the budget. And what we didn't account for, we had a number of migrations, and the migrations is what we were accounting for. But while we were focused on these migrations, other applications and other application teams were building net new native cloud applications in the cloud, and we did not account for those. So we thought we were doing a great job, and then we forgot, wait a minute, we've now built this landing zone. People want to use it. So 2 years ago, we actually were able, or last year was actually the first year, we were able to reach out to all of our business lines and all of our partners and get an application level budget down to the application. What applications were you going to bring in next year? Nobody's ever thought about that in my company. I don't know anybody else, but we have never thought to that level of granularity before. And we had the support. People were actually with us at the table, talking to us about what they were going to bring in. And we were actually, at the time, we were using Confluence to track all of this. Not a great tool. Don't do that. It's a very limited functionality in Confluence. But that's how we did it for the first year. And we would show the actuals and the budget amount to our business lines through this Confluence pages. And they would then go in there and update their forecast for what they thought, was going to happen the next couple of months. And it was the first endeavor into this that we had ever done. It was the first time that we were actually trying to bring accountability back to these business lines to say, you said you were going to bring this app in, you thought it was going to cost X, it's costing X times a jillion. What are we going to do about that now? And it was great. It was the first time that we were really able to do that, but we were using unsustainable products. So we then, luckily, I have a very strong business analyst team, and they were able to build us a tool using some of our existing tools, but it was totally homegrown, where we would be able to do this in a more systemic manner. And so fast forward to this year, we are now automated. We start with some spreadsheets just because it's easier to send them around to all the people, because not everybody has access to the tool. But we are really working with our teams to get down to that next year. What do you think you're going to be bringing in? And the exciting part is we have all the data from last year. So now I know we said we were going to bring in X applications. We actually brought in X plus Y apps. Here, there were 12 of them that didn't actually make it. We had 92 additional apps. And here's where we fell short on our budgeting. This is some of the things that we did that we might want to do better this year. And that's the one thing that I love about FinOps. It is such a learning curve, but you can take all of your lessons learned and do better the next year. And that's like my favorite thing.
So how much of those processes that you were establishing to build budgets on a per application level, how much of that differed from some of the on-prem traditional experiences that there may have been. And for reference, a lot of my past history in IT, you would have capital projects, and that's what would fund any type of net new development. And as part of those capital projects, you go through a whole staging process where you scope the application, you talk to vendors, you get certain pricing estimates, and whether it's internal, external, you start building resource lists. And that's how you traditionally have built a lot of the estimates. Is that what y'all started leveraging as a foundational component of your cloud estimating for these applications?
So I'm not exactly sure if this will answer your question, but you're 100% right. But for us, OpEx and CapEx, or run rate and CapEx, are totally different. So what I have to budget for 6 months before the next year starts is the run rate. But when you were building things that were assets, you didn't have to do that at the same time. You could build a business case and get capital for that at any time during the year. So when that great idea hits you and you decide you're going to go and do this as a line of business or commercial business or consumer business line, they can go and build that business case at the time. Now we're asking people 6 to 12 months before they bring something in to tell me what they're going to bring in. And oh, by the way, I need to know about how much it's going to cost. So they have very little idea. So it's kind of making magic, happen out of, that crystal ball thing that we all don't have. So that's for us the big difference. CapEx comes when a project idea is formulated, and depending on how much the money is, that's how high up the chain it has to go. But now we're not really working that way, because we've also, while we were doing all of this cloud stuff and migration stuff, we changed our delivery model. So now we're fully agile. And I'm sure it's the Citizens Agile, methodology. We probably made our own, but we do work with neighborhoods and pods and towns and all of that. And towns get funded, and then we trickle that down to the individual pods. So go ahead, Alex.
Awesome. Yeah. So we do have a cool question that I think is important, because this is one question that when we were prepping for this episode, I wanted to ask, but I wanted to wait. So I love it. Approximately how many applications, to just get a sense of scale?
How many applications do I have running in the cloud now?
When you started doing it by application, like how many does that mean?
We were at 134 was our first. And then from 134, I can't remember the number, but it was 134 plus 92. That's what we have running in the cloud now. They're not all production workloads. Some are still, in their migration path.
Got it. Yep. And then I'll throw one more up there because it's from Steph, who we missed today. Cool top, Alex. She saw me iron this on the other day. Thanks, Steph. We miss you. Hopefully we're doing a good job. Bryce, on some of these questions with budgeting and forecasting, I think it's really interesting and also very unique what Amy's path with it, right? I think a lot of times it takes a much longer to get to that granularity and to get that movement. What do you think are some of the top hiccups or like pain points that you see when working with customers when they start trying to go, get close to the result that Amy's at right now?
Yeah, it's very common that customers try to get granular very, very quickly. And it's the same way when they do not only budgeting, but when they try to do cost allocation. They look at the cost and usage report, they look at a lot of different tools, and because they can get down to the fraction of a penny in terms of cost allocations, they think that they want to do that for budgeting purposes as well. And the challenge there is you're going to, chase your tail a lot trying to do that kind of thing. And so what we typically encourage customers to do is see if you can do t-shirt sizing for your budgeting approach. When an application is coming to the platform, or they're planning in the next 12-month budget that they want to move a particular workload to the platform, but they don't know necessarily what it's going to cost, we say, okay, in general, do you think you're going to support X amount of customers in that workload? Do you think you're going to run X amount of transactions? And then you can try to t-shirt size it and say, okay, well, there's relatively an application or workload like that already operating today. It generally costs this much month over month. So we can put you into that t-shirt size in a bucket for forecasting purposes.
That's what we're focusing on now when you don't know exactly what kind of workload and it's not a migration. So it's easier when you're moving apps from on-prem to the cloud. You can tell if it's a large, medium, or small application. But we're talking to our customers about that when they're thinking about their budget. But the good thing for us is, although the budget will be set in stone and the budget cannot change, we can allow teams to move money around within their bucket. So it's a high level line item in the P&L, but within it, we can move money around. So people are happy about that. Well, what if I change my mind and I don't want to bring in X, Y, or Z? I'm going to bring in 1, 2, or 3. Well, you can do that. You have this much, these funds are allotted to you, so to speak. But the other good thing is, to your point, it's very hard to know now what you're going to do then. So we do have an open forecasting every month. We have our business lines go in and make adjustments to their forecast. So that's what we're really tracking from a variance perspective on how well are we utilizing the dollars that we have in the cloud. It's about the forecasting. And when we're over and when we're under, what do we do about it? How do we optimize to bring those costs down? And that's what we show to our CIO. And I am lucky enough to have a CIO who really cares about this. So every month we have a meeting with him and all of his directs, and we'll get down to that level of granularity. I can see each app and what the variance to the budget is, what the variance to the forecast is. And we're focused on making those forecast decisions because that's what brings the accountability to the people bringing those applications in. I am not accountable for those. My team is not accountable for them, nor is my boss or his boss. It's those business lines who are bringing those dollars and those applications in, and they have to understand that they need to do the right thing for those apps. Although it's centralized payment process, it's everybody's world right now, and we really need to focus on that. And that's the biggest thing we've done to bring that accountability.
The ownership piece is so important, along the lines of everything with cloud, right? Having central visibility, but also and really turning this process into a mechanism, but also putting the ownership there. We've got another good question. With hundreds of applications, do you do sanity checks on the top applications, e.g. ensure their growth rates make sense compared to the other applications? Like, one thing that I know we used to do when I was on the customer side is, all right, what does the EC2 footprint look like in this application? Is it more efficient than this one? Why do we have a difference? Do you do some of that?
Well, we do a lot of all of the things that we're hopefully supposed to be doing, looking at these applications and understanding what their expectations were. There are applications that are going to cost a lot of money. That's just the way it works. But what is the value of having that application running in the cloud? Well, because of that application, we're able to process 10 times more loans or loans more efficiently or bring a better experience to our end customers. What is the value of that application? And that's huge for us. And sometimes we didn't really understand that. We didn't really understand that at the beginning. Again, being in infrastructure, I didn't really focus on what the end customer, what they were looking for from a bank. And now we're a little bit more in tune with that, trying to understand what all of these applications are bringing to our customers. But we also do a lot of right sizing stuff. We're always looking at recommendations for all the things that we're supposed to be doing, auto scaling and spot instances and buying reserved instances when appropriate. My environment is 98% covered with savings plans, and I can do that because we're in a migration path. So we're looking at these things constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, and it's a constant evolution, right? I think that's an important thing that all three of us would agree on here. If you are doing this at your company and, it's not a good thing if like year after year, the process and everything looks exactly the same. You have to evolve it. You have to work with the teams. You have to figure out what works best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say that's even, if you look at, you mentioned that you were adopting the agile methodology. One of the most key pieces about that is the feedback loop.
Yeah.
Whether that's an innovation sprint or whatever you're doing part of your program increment planning, you're going to have that feedback loop. So even in cost optimization or even in FinOps, right? Agile principles still apply.
And it is important because we're showing data to so many different groups of people or different personas. So we created all of these different dashboards for the different persona. What do my finance people want to see? What does my CIO want to see? What do my developers need to see? And trying to give them, and again, there's so much data out there, but trying to give them a quick view of just what it is they need to see is really important. And you only know that by asking.
Yep. Not making the assumption. Big deal. So we have about 5 minutes left. I do want to spend the last 5 minutes saying what is next. So you've made so much improvement and so much progress in how you're tracking and forecasting and the relationships you have with these application teams and giving them that ownership. But what do you want to, in a perfect world, bring in next?
So I think the thing that I really want to focus on now that I have a team that is really strong in what everyone's kind of role is here, I really want to take this to the automation level. And I'm not a technology person, which is funny that I've been in infrastructure for 11 years. But people on my team are, and I think it's really time to take this to the automation level, making sure that we have the policies in place to restrict what we can do, allow people with the freedom to innovate, but make sure that the guardrails are there. Modernization of our applications is the biggest thing. We're now starting to determine what applications are able to auto scale. So you can't use spot instances appropriately if you're not using auto scaling. So making sure that our applications are modern enough to utilize auto scaling, and then to hopefully help our teams to make those changes and those upgrades to modernize them to increase that. And we're always watching our spot instances and trying to grow that. So our next step is really automation, but I'm not 100% sure what that all means. So if anybody has any advice,
it sounds like perfect scenario to do a fin hack, which I'll drop the information in the chat, but a hackathon around finding those cost savings. But I think this is a great question to round things out from John. Amy, if you could give yourself advice when you started this role and really when your role evolved into this, knowing what you know now, what would you say?
So one of the things that I waited a little bit too long for is to get more support from my higher level people. So I would say it took me about 18 months to get that real support and get a meeting that we could talk about this all the time. And I think because of how you have to change the culture to get developers to do what you want them to do, which is, we've never done that before. I've never told a developer, he's got to do X, Y, or Z. But now that we're trying to build those relationships, it definitely helps to have that meeting once a month with my CIO and all of that tower, because they trickle that down to their teams, and their teams are starting to really see the importance of why we're doing all of this. I'm not trying to stifle them. I'm not saying, no, you can't bring this into the cloud, or no, you can't run that workload the way you want to. What I'm trying to bring is value, making sure that the dollars we are spending are really the dollars we need to spend on the things that we need to spend them on, and not just moving everything to the cloud and wasting hordes and hordes of money. People still have the cloud is free. The cloud is not free. It's very expensive.
It's what you make it. It starts out free.
Don't
That's the important part. Well, Amy, this has been so great. Thank you for being a special guest today. Everybody who jumped in the comments, thank you so much for jumping in. Even Steph on her day off jumping in, trying to be an overachiever over there. Again, this is the keys to AWS optimization. You can find our past episodes in the YouTube channel that I linked above. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or costoptimization@amazon.com. We will answer those emails. But for today, I hope everybody has a great into the week, does not have to deal with too much heat. And thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Have a great day.
Thank you, Alex and Bryce. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Bye.
y'all.